CFB 900 live on a Sunday evening. In the next 900 seconds, Bobby and I will tell you everything you need to know about Week 8's takeaways. Then we will jump ahead to the Week 9 board as the market is open. And before we get you out of here, a best bet. So, Bobby, we are on the clock. Let's head right into the Heisman market. Bobby, things kind of got shook up before Saturday even happened. Carson Beck fell out of the Heisman race, and our Heisman tickets kind of go up in smoke. And now we're looking at a two-man race between Simpson and Fernando Mendoza. What are your thoughts here on the Heisman going into Week 9?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you mentioned, we kind of mentioned that tier 1, and it has lessened by 1 after Friday night. Miami's lost to Louisville. Simpson is going to be the favorite, like right now, slightly ahead of Mendoza. But I do think as we progress through November and whatnot, it's going to end up being Mendoza is going to be the number 1 top choice. Just simply because I don't know, while we love Alabama on this podcast this year, Alabama's still got a ton of tough games left this year. And, you know, it's going to be really hard. I mean, if they go 12-0, 13-0 in the regular season, like Simpson just wins. But I don't know if he's going to do that. So how bad is that? What is that performance when/if Alabama loses? That's going to be a key there. I'm still not buying Julian Sand or anyone from Ohio State in that market. I'm still going to question it. Obviously, Marcel Reed, Gunnar Stockton had a great game and continues to put up stats. Jeremiah Love has entered the picture a bit, and the problem is Price just gets too much run. So it's going to be really reliant on a media narrative on that front, because he's not going to put up the yard stats. He might put up the touchdowns, though, to get the award. And if you're looking down the board, after Georgia Tech beat our Duke ticket this week, which I'll mention again, Haynes King, I think he can get he can get some of the narrative if you really want to look down the board. But I think as we move through November with Indiana's schedule, I think it's clear that Mendoza is going to be the top choice in the market and probably odds on going into that Ohio State game, should they meet the Big Ten title game, with a chance to win it.
Yeah, you mentioned Haynes King, and things now are really shook up in the conference futures market, specifically with the ACC, as Miami went from a heavy favorite to win it. I believe they were minus 150 as of last week. Now Miami is sitting in the second spot, plus 260, but you have an undefeated Virginia team, plus 460. And now Georgia Tech is your clear leader at plus 230. So how do you make sense out of these conference futures markets when 2 touchdown favorites are losing left and right?
Now, okay, so about the ACC specifically here, Miami is still probably the best bet on this board, despite the loss on Friday night at plus 260. I think that's a pretty aggressive move. After that loss, they're still going to be double-digit favorites in every game remaining on their schedule. At SMU and at Pitt are kind of the big ones where that's going to be around that. All the other games are 20+. Now,
minus
of course,
30
Mario,
this week against Stanford.
Right. Mario can Mario anytime. And as I kind of mentioned on Saturday morning and kind of the aftermath and talking with other bettors about it, it was, they've used their mulligan and now they don't get another one essentially. But they're still the best team raw power ratings wise in the ACC, probably by margin here on that one. But what becomes really interesting, and we were talking about the tiebreakers in these leagues, and there's 2 conferences here that kind of really tie into this, and it's the ACC and the SEC actually. Both of them still working with eight game conference schedules for this season. So what's going to happen here and what makes these markets really kind of hard to bet right now is that there's not a lot of crossover between these teams. It's really easy for teams to avoid each other when everyone's only playing 8 conference games. I mean, it's very possible in these leagues where you get, 3-4 teams tied at the top and none of them have any crossover games during the season, or maybe one of them and it breaks one time, but it's really going to go down the board. I mean, I was messing around with stuff on Saturday on a website where you can kind of click and, do a tons of wins and losses for the rest of the season. And you're running into all of these games where you're getting, 6-2 teams, 6-3 teams, 6-2 teams, or
Right.
In other leagues, like 7-2 teams, like, and it's like opponent conference win percentage, tiebreakers. Like, you really have to know the tiebreakers and honestly make a bet in one of these markets right now and feel really strongly confident. You're going to have to like correctly predict the outcome of not just the team you're betting on's team games, but like maybe other results down the line. Like, I'm just making this up, but like if you bet a Louisville future, like you also want Miami to be in that tiebreaker, and maybe help you break a tie with SMU maybe down the road. I don't, I'm just making something up here off the cuff, but like you're going to have to think about all of these things and how each game actually affects these conference races, specifically this year, because with all the parity, and that was talked about a lot with Bill Connolly's tweet with S&P Plus about the number 1 ranked team to the number 17th ranked team and whatnot, just like the gaps and how everything's different from 2018, 2019. And you're just seeing that sport flatten out quite a bit. Well, that also means the records are flattening out a bit. And that's why, it's possible 3-loss teams can get in the conversation for the playoff. But this is going to be a very interesting where tiebreakers are really going to matter and be something where you're going to have to factor those in to the conference odds, not just about who you want to bet on to win a league, because you might need other things to happen for them to get there that have nothing to do with them.
Bobby, what else is in the notebook for week 8 so we can never talk about week 8 ever again?
Yes, and I would like to do that. So we mentioned Carson Beck in Miami a ton here off the cusp, but he finally faced a defensive line that could kind of get after him and pressure him, and he turned the ball over with four INTs. Mario and Braum, who's excellent as a dog, like clearly outcoached him, schemed him up, and got Miami uncomfortable very early. But that's a key to Carson Beck, and that was one of his issues back at Georgia. And now you're like, okay, now that's a continued trend now that he's in a second place. Next one, Arizona State, Texas Tech. Obviously a wild last couple of minutes with lead changes there. But I think it really shows you the importance of special teams. Arizona State last year, this year, like bottom special teams unit in the country. That game quite literally turned around because Arizona State's poor punt coverage and punt return, like helped Texas Tech score 15 points in like 2 minutes, basically to take a lead there before Arizona State was able to finish it off late and get that win. But that's a huge thing. And I'm really wondering, like, Kenny Dillingham's a coach I really like, and a lot of people around the country do. But you're starting to wonder, like, hey, is this really like a gap for him? He needs something. If his teams want to continue and move that program forward in Tempe, he's got to figure that out, because now this is a 2-year trend of really poor special teams. And if it costs you a game a year, that could be the difference between the conference title in that conference, especially tiebreakers, as we mentioned in the last segment there, but also like making the playoff or not. So something to watch for with Arizona State. Another one here, Boston College. So it was announced surprisingly pregame that Dylan Lonergan was benched for Grayson James. And UConn, who took money all week against BC, with BC, just slew of injuries and all that, took even more money. And that's always good when you switch quarterbacks, you just for benching, not for injury or anything. Yeah. And the line steams against you. Lonergan's a sophomore, very talented. We talked about his performance early in the year against Michigan State and how impressive it was. He's not been good since then in ACC play. Boston College is like bottomed out completely. But Grayson James is like an FIU transfer who's like a JAG minus. He offers nothing, low A dot. And quite frankly, like switching quarterbacks doesn't fix the defense. Really not sure what Bill O'Brien's doing at this one. Couple more here. Disturbing box score with Texas and Kentucky. Full season of questionable performances from the Longhorns, but my God, Kentucky should have won that game. Georgia keeps playing with fire. Gunnar Stockton mentioned his 5 TDs, 17 fourth quarter points to help the Bulldogs beat Ole Miss there. A game we suggested would be a shootout, but Georgia continues to be an interesting team in the national spotlight. Obviously a team with a ton of talent, but their flaws are stark. Limited pass rush. Yep. We're not a fan of the secondary, and the offensive line's an issue as well. They're not impressive in these wins. And it's, you look at their schedule and you're like, weird world. Like Georgia could have 4 losses. They could have easily lost the Tennessee game. They could have lost to Auburn, obviously did lose to Bama, and they could have lost this one to Ole Miss. Like,
Yep.
Georgia's really playing with fire as you continue to go through this tough SEC schedule. You want to, they're obviously a contender to win the league. They're one of the best teams in the league, but man, they are really gutting out these performances and not looking good at any of them. Duke, obviously one of the best bets we lost this week. One of the most frustrating games I've seen in a while. A complete dominated Georgia Tech in the first half, and they went to half tied at 7. Contained the rush, forced them to 3rd and longs, just kind of as I thought, with the matchup kind of angle with that bet, which by the way closed very good as far as where the market went with it. But as of sometime in the middle of second quarter, Duke had 2 drives inside the Georgia Tech red zone, and the score of those series were Georgia Tech 7, Duke 0, because of a fumble 6 on a botched exchange at the 1 and a field goal with a botched hold. Tech got control of it, obviously, in the fourth quarter, but it's just another missed opportunity for the Blue Devils, as we saw them do the same thing in the first half against Illinois in week 2, in our game we mentioned, and said it numerous times with the Illini, and saying how that was like a fraudulent box score there. But so Duke's done this a couple times. But that's the notebook for this week.
All right. Let's jump right ahead into week 9 openers. The market is open, and lines have already been on the move. Bobby, anything Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night in any of the CUSA action?
The Tuesday night's going to be a good one, actually, in CUSA, which is relative to what you consider good. FIU, obviously, Western Kentucky took a ton of money against FIU last week. Rumors of Jennings, the quarterback for FIU, who's quite good, not being available in that game. He was, and they dominated that one. I wish I didn't hear the Jennings stuff, because that would have been an absolute bet. But some people really like Kennesaw, but seeing them as a road favorite, it's a little weird there. Probably going to check out those 3s on FIU potentially late, as we move throughout the week there. Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, 2 teams of probably the 2 best teams, again, relative to CUSA in the league. Louisiana Tech does have a good defense, but interesting where that one goes. But I kind of just agree with the market there on that one. As we move forward to Friday, Cal, Virginia Tech, you saw that number actually opens a little bit below 3 in that one. Long travel, short week, obviously makes sense for the steam there on the Hokies on that one. I certainly agreed with that move. As we move to Saturday, Baylor, Cincinnati, just instincts. I think that game's a little bit high on that one. I'm going to look into that one.
Yeah, the Baylor game was a little bit odd with the weather delay, but Baylor really rallied. That score got real tight, real fast there at the end.
Right, and Baylor's obviously, I'm concerned about Sorsby and the matchup with him on the ground. Running, as we saw Jackson Arnold in week 1 dominate Baylor with mobile quarterbacks against Baylor. That was like a huge takeaway from week 1.
Right.
And they've been disappointing, but I do think they can score, and I do think Cincinnati is a little overpriced right now in the market. Excuse me, my throat's a little rough today. Michigan State, that one opened short of 14. That's 137, 138. Yep. Now we've seen it blown past. Continued sell of the Spartans. They kicked a field goal late to cover against IU in a battle of 2 coaches who clearly knew the number there. But Sparty's in a rough place, and Michigan has some matchup edges there in that one. And then going over, I got a couple more here. 181, 182, Temple, Tulsa. So there was an interesting movement with Temple. Temple was actually a part of a service release last week against Charlotte. In a move, again, I fully agreed with that one. Charlotte's a bottom 5 team in the country. But Charlotte took a ton of game day money because there was a rumor that Temple quarterback Evan Simon might not play in that one. So with a possible injury rumor, where does this line go as we see Temple on the road again? I think that's just something to watch for and let the market kind of tell you kind of what's going on here as Temple, obviously the team the market likes, but possible injury concerns in that one. And then another game I'm looking at from the market side, 189, 190 USF Memphis. Yeah. So obviously this one's changed a little bit, and obviously a little bit similar to the ODU JMU game that we discussed last week, where you have an upset the week before the big game. So the look ahead on this one was actually Memphis. You saw 3 and 3.5 and now we've completely flipped. Memphis quarterback Brendan Lewis did leave the game against UAB with an injury. I haven't seen an update on what exactly it was, but obviously you've seen significant movement with USF now above 3 on their side, 3.5, 4 in that game after Memphis gets upset by UAB, who fired Trent Dilfer and immediately gets a 2-point upgrade. Not kidding there on that one, but interesting to see that move. That's a little stark now. I mean, I have to do some adjustments on my end to figure out what you want to do with it, but how you look at this game definitely changes based on the look ahead movement from last week. And that's the market.
Right on. Before we get into best bets, guys, if you don't mind, please give us a like if you are on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review if you're on Spotify. The feedback lets Bobby and I know that we're doing a great job, and we very much appreciate you guys listening. Last week, we finished 2-2 on best bets. That brings us to 13 and 15-1 on the season. Bobby, we got another best bet tonight, and we are looking at Iowa State laying the 2. So why are we fading BYU and playing Iowa State?
Yeah, playing a little bit of a situational spot here on the Cyclones. I talked a little bit about being a little skeptical on BYU last week. Obviously, they beat Utah this week, but that's an underrated, huge rivalry in the sport, and Iowa State's coming off a bye. So I just like the situational angle. I think Ames is a real hard place to play in. I think the number should be a little bit higher on the Cyclones, so we'll make Iowa State a best bet for this week.
You can follow Bobby at BobbyDigital2. You can follow the show at CFB900. Be sure to follow us on Twitter so you can join for the Tuesday Twitter poll where you will actually vote and have your say as far as which is the 4th game that Bobby will break down for our big game breakdown Wednesdays. You can also join us for Sunday morning coffee where we try to give out some bets that'll get some CLV. We went 5-2 last week on Sunday morning coffee, which isn't bad. Bobby and I will be back here on Wednesday evening with all of the big game breakdowns for week 9, as well as the updated market movement and some more best bets. So until then, wishing you guys the absolute best of luck. Adios.